Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Happy Head podcast. My name is Paul and I am your host today. We have the amazing Nuthan Manohar all the way from Kerala in India. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Paul. Lovely. It's despite the difficult times, I think I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, things aren't that good at the moment in India, are they?
Things are difficult, quite challenging because, one, we have a very large population, and on the other side, it's a kind of poor country. So infrastructure is poor. The number of, healthcare beds, ICU beds that are available is less. So situation is kind of difficult, but I think as a country we are fairly resilient. So I'm sure that we'll bounce back. Many people that I personally know have passed away because of the pandemic, but I think we're all working towards a better future.
Yeah, and I think it's a huge lesson for everybody that we like to think we are masters of the universe, but when it comes down to it, a tiny microscopic thing can lay us all low. So it's quite a humbling experience, I think, for everybody.
Extremely humbling, and I guess that this is the time, when such difficult situations happen, we start really taking stock of what is life all about, what really matters for us. So in a way, this terrible situation can also be a blessing in disguise, because many of us have started asking that question, and I think that can actually lead to something beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. I think here in the UK, lots of people are kind of reflecting on the fact that they spend hours and hours and hours every week commuting backwards and forwards to a job that they're not too happy about. And lots of people are taking the time to kind of reflect on that and think about what their next move is. They may still be working for someone else, but they're going to adjust how they do. They may be working from home or working, changing jobs for a little bit of a lower salary and working more local, so they don't have this massive commute. Because as far as we know, we're only here one time, and when you compare our lives in comparison with the life of the universe, it's infinitesimally small. So you've got to make the most of it.
True. It's just one life that we have. I mean, even though I'm from yoga, we believe in reincarnations and all that. But I think if just one life lived well is good enough. Because if you can ask the right questions while we are alive, and come to those answers in such a way that we can have some sort of joy, some sort of peace despite the calamities that come, the challenges that come, and a deep sense of purpose, so that we can leave the world a better place. I think the greatest blessing that anyone can have, and not just for ourselves, and that becomes a blessing for, I think, entire humanity.
I just love what you said there. One life lived well. That's all anybody can ask for, isn't it? One life lived well. So when you come to your last day on this earth, to actually look back and go, you know what? I lived my life and I lived it well. That is probably the ultimate achievement for anyone. Would you agree?
I would say it is the ultimate achievement, and it would be one of the most difficult ones also. Because strangely enough, the brain is not really wired for living out well. Because I think when I started really looking into well being, it was at a time when I personally was going through one of my darkest, most challenging phases in life. And that's when I realized that, your brain is, by default negative. It is constantly vigilant, looking for stressors. It doesn't like change. It is constantly comparing its, your own life with somebody else's life or what could have been. And therefore, even if you have a lot of free time, we would actually end up using that free time to make our lives more miserable. Strangely and sadly enough, as something similar was noted in buffoons. So it seems in buffoons they have maybe 30% of their day required for finding food, mate, friends, everything. 70% is literally free time. And you would think that they would become like a very happy tribe, but instead, 70% of the time were fights, and people were just making each other miserable. Well, not people, buffoons. And when it comes to human beings, sadly, when we would see that most often when we get free time, for instance, if you look at the kind of lifestyle our grandparents lived, there was a lot of chores to be done. Right now, with a lot of equipments, we have actually cut down the time necessary for making our breakfast, making sure that we have clothes to wear. But in the process, we have only become more stressed out and less happier. So possibly maybe it's not about time, it's just the way that our brains are wired. Now, thankfully, both in monkeys as well as in human beings, we do have this ability to think and possibly train ourselves to have a better life. So, one life, if lived well, is good enough, but that ultimately is extremely challenging because we are not wired for it.
Yeah, and I guess the reason why we're not wired for it is that if when we were still living in caves and living in trees, having just kind of like transformed from being apes ourselves to kind of the form that we're in now, if we'd have been wired for happiness and relaxation and taking it easy, we wouldn't be here today, would we? We would, because we wouldn't have gone out searching for food, we wouldn't have gone out looking for shelter, we wouldn't have been curious, we wouldn't have learned how to make fire, and on and on and on and on. So we were kind of wired to be curious and to move forward and to learn and grow, because that's what was needed to propagate the species. Yeah. Whereas now we have over propagated the species, and now it would be a great time to kind of evolve into a relaxing, taking it easy, be happier kind of mode. But unfortunately, as you know, evolution just takes forever as far as we're concerned. And so you said it earlier on, we need to start training ourselves to be less stressed out, less tense, and more relaxed and looking for things that make us feel good.
You're absolutely right. I mean, um, so ironically, I mean, I used to work in brand consulting and brand communication, where the entire job was to make sure a particular community in any particular country, a particular set, group of people would be influenced to think and behave in a particular way with just communication, which is maybe 30 seconds long. And that's what I used to specialize in. And so it was fairly easy to see, how you can tweak behavior just with flashy communication. Well, not always flashy. Most of the times it's subtle, it's subliminal, the way it kind of, merges into what is, your aspiration. And you would realize that human beings are extremely susceptible to influence. And yes, as you just rightly pointed out, in the past, I mean, all the way back in cave ages, the only reason why we survived is because we had that survival instinct, what we call that sympathetic nervous system or the sympathetic response. And again, it was only during when I went through that dark phase that I really started, studying into what is it and how does it really work. And I realized that when we kind of, what's it, when we try to kind of pinpoint and fix that the primary behavior that we have, it doesn't really work. Instead, if we can go on training ourselves over and over again to kind of decondition such that you're not constantly vigilant, you know that you're kind of safe. And to be honest, we are actually, compared to the cave ages, quite safer now, that we don't have to really compare our lives with somebody else or what it could have been constantly. So if we kind of train ourselves there and then train ourselves so that we are more open to uncertainties, more open to failure, then I think there is definitely a chance. So those are the kind of things that kind of keeps me going, because most often when people come to me, or especially groups, I try to understand, okay, what is the quality of life? I mean, how do they kind of at a physical level, how are they doing? At an emotional level, at a psychological level, in terms of social levels, and what about their environmental factors? And we try, I mean, through workshops, through sessions, we try to kind of drill down that even though this is your wiring, you don't have to respond that way. And what happens when you start practicing? How often do you need to practice the pause or mindfulness or breath work or whatever it is, maybe acts of kindness? How often? And soon you would realize that you have shifted quality of life without really not doing much. It becomes very easy for you to actually deal with life on a daily basis and still be able to enjoy a greater quality of life. So it's challenging, but at the same time, it's deeply satisfying to see that with our own brains, which is wired for negativity, we can actually turn ourselves to be more positive and have a good, beautiful life.
Um, Why do you think more people don't train themselves to kind of separate this stimulus response situation? Because if we did take the time to kind of like, okay, there's the stimulus and I'm not going to respond that way, I'm going to take a step back and think and then either not respond or do something different. What do you think is the main reason why people don't do that?
Let's start physiologically. Now, I'm going to bring in a bit of Ayurveda, Indian system of medicine here, because whenever there is a stressor in the environment, based on your physiology, your body type, the response you would have would be different. Most of us might get anxious, maybe frightened, or maybe stressed out. I mean, when they say stressed out, it most often it's feelings of anxiety. Some of us might actually start getting angry the more stressors we are facing. We start actually dealing in going towards anger. And some of us actually get so overwhelmed to the point of feeling sad, feeling depressed. So the way we respond is very different. Now, the fact is that there was a stressor and it kind of worked with your brain, with your body, and you start processing a thought, and intensity of the thought kind of transforms itself into an emotion. An emotion could be maybe I'm feeling extremely nervous, I don't think I can do this. Or maybe it could be like, how could they do this, this is not right, I'm really getting angry about it. Or maybe something like, I am not good at it, I'm gonna fail. So any of these emotions that come up, actually it takes a lot of effort to be able to shift from, what is the stressor, what is the thought, and what is the emotion. It's happening so fast because this is something that we have as a inherent pattern within us. So it kind of keeps happening over and over again, that it's almost a split second before which, a stressor and the response starts. And if you've gone through traumatic experiences, then the stress response is even larger. So what we need to do is slowly decondition that, and that often takes personal effort and energy and a lot of discipline. But ultimately, it is possible. So I kind of try to see if there's a way to shift from the sense of effort and discipline to a sense of love. Because when you kind of start looking at it with a sense of love, that this response that I'm having is actually my survival instinct. It's kept me and my species alive. So you start looking at it from a sense of love, it starts to change. And then it becomes easier to shift. But to be honest, all of us, we have our go to patterns. So breaking that is often difficult, but again, like what we can see from various research, it is possible.
Yeah, breaking patterns isn't easy. I mean, it's like having a bad habit and wanting to stop that habit. For some people, it seems to be really easy. They can just like kind of like flick a switch in their head and they suddenly stop smoking. Whereas for other people, they try lots and lots of different things, and 10 years later, they're still stuck with the bad habit. So, do you think that is a problem of conditioning, or that the person hasn't found the right stimulus to change that habit?
That's a very, very interesting question because, thankfully, I tend not to get addicted or, it's stuck on habits which are not healthy for me. So I often have had this question to someone who smokes or someone who has maybe say substance abuse or alcohol, because I've been very curious to know why is it, because, why are you, you are very aware that this is a negative habit and that it's causing harm to you. But then why is it that, there isn't enough stimulus to come out of it? And often the answer is that, there is a lack of self-worth or a lack of self-love. There might be trauma that they have experienced, and this substance is actually helping them in a very negative way, but to deal with this deep-seated emotion. So if you can shift them without even touching this particular physical habit, if you can help them shift from that sense of wound or hurt and become people who love themselves a bit more, automatically these habits start to change. So it's very rarely about finding the right stimulus, so that, if that had worked, all those cancer messages on, cigarette packs would have worked. But we realize that it doesn't really happen because what is causing us to go after maybe alcohol or cigarettes might be actual trauma that the person has experienced, or maybe childhood experiences that has been very, very unpleasant. So I would want to see how you can work on that, and then automatically things happen. Second way is that often when people do go for habits which are negative, it is because they themselves sense a low energy. If you ask them, okay, I don't feel energized, so this becomes a stimulus. I don't feel energized, so this helps me deal with a negative emotion. So that's where I feel breath work comes in very, very handy, because if you kind of practice breath work, pranayama, it really shifts the energy that you feel in a day. And therefore, automatically, the amount of, say, maybe cigarettes or alcohol or any of the substances, the quantity that they would consume would actually go down. And if you can get them to keep practicing over and over again, there's a good chance that they actually come out of it. So you could look at maybe breath work as a way to, supplement, say, the addiction and processes, problems like that.
So what you're saying then, Nuthan, is rather than kind of focusing on the bad habit, we should take the focus away from that and look at kind of our overall energy levels and feelings and emotions and deal with kind of those first. And then either the habit will disappear naturally, or we'll have enough of the right stuff to deal with the habit straight away.
True. Let me give you another example where there was no substance abuse. Instead, here was someone very young, has a tumor in the brain. But then when I check, I realize that the person is not taking the medicines that is necessary, supposed to be taking medicine 3 times in a day, but is not taking medicines. So now this is the other side of it, where you're supposed to take something and you're not taking it. And all I kind of worked on was, to see how you could help the person identify, more of, self-worth and self-love, and being able to look at yourself as though you are, responsible for taking care of yourself. And once that happened, automatically these positive habits started to, take root. So there was, I mean, even though I come from yoga and the strange stuff, often there is very less of magic. The magic happens by themselves. And the shift that is necessary, the transformation that is necessary, often happens by dialogue, questions, and little bits of practice. Little bits of practice, scattered through the day.
So when a client comes to see you, what kind of process do you take them through, kind of from start to finish?
Like, to be honest, the process has changed greatly since 2020, because earlier I could meet them, and that actually gives a lot of input. Because again, according to Ayurveda, when you look at a person, you can kind of the way the person moves, you can get a lot of insights into their body type and how their brain might work. What would be, strength that they would have, what are the weaknesses they have, whether it's up here or whether it's in the body. So that's something that I've kind of been devoid of. So it's become a bit more challenging. However, through online medium itself, the idea is to understand. Okay, again, take the process would be something like explain how the brain works or how the body behaves. Leave people with simple techniques which they can incorporate, and give them the experience of it as well. So, for instance, if you need to release stress from your body, you should practice it, and you should be able to feel that you have released something. Likewise, when you say relaxation, what does it feel like? Can you experience it? What are the changes that would happen to your body that you can actually notice? And finally, for instance, for the stress, you need to restore to a state of happiness and relax, deep relaxation, so restoration. Um, so if you can experience that, then that is good. And often I think I would appeal to the logical part of the mind, because it's all mostly about practices which you do maybe for 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 15 minutes. And then kind of, once this 3 or 5 minutes kind of takes root, often it becomes easier to ask the more difficult questions and probe into them and get the answers. So I really start from the body, explaining how the body works and how the breath works, and how you could actually use your body and your breath to maybe change the way the brain is experiencing situations and processing emotions. And then from there go into maybe questions and answers, and then slowly kind of get into a state where you actually have a better lifestyle kind of intervention, which could include what kind of foods you need to maybe say stock up on, and what kind of foods might, if you say, reduce. For instance, if people are angry, so this is mostly applicable in India, right, Tim? Because we eat a lot of spicy food. If there is an anger management issue, if you kind of bring down the spice levels in the food, specifically red chilies and garlic and onions, you would actually notice in few months that the anger levels goes down. So without even trying too hard, they can actually get it there. Start from the body, work to the mind, and then go into lifestyle changes. That I think becomes a very slow, smooth, and beautiful transition, and often gets you much more than you actually started off with.
So body and mind working together to then work on the issue. Yeah.
Yes. And I heavily borrow from yoga. So often in West, yoga is considered like a flexibility exercise. But when we think about Ashta Yoga, it is actually a path to realize your highest potential. And specifically, it's about managing your mind. And it starts with, how do you interact in the world? What are the, rules that you follow for yourself? Then comes how do you take care of your body with yoga asanas, which is what we're all familiar with, which actually becomes a conduit, a pathway to actually access something deeper, and which is your energy level. So then comes your breath works, then comes your ability to withdraw from senses. So, for instance, I mean, if I hear a very irritating noise right now, there is going to be a response. I'm going to get irritated, I'm going to get angry. But if I know how to disconnect a bit from the stimulus, especially sensory, then I can actually pull back and have a better day. Then comes our ability to focus on one single thing. That's something that we all try to, how to focus, learn to focus, and then you work on meditation. So it kind of is like a big, long 8 steps. So I try to use this not, maybe to answer, questions of why am I alive, but just to make sure that we can live a better life wherever we are.
You just raised an interesting point there, Nuthan. You're saying that over in the West, yoga is more about kind of flexibility and suppleness, but it's what you're saying, it's actually more than that.
True. So one of, especially in the Yoga Sutras, which is considered one of the main texts for yoga, the definition of yoga is chitta vritti nirodha, which means the cessation of mind's wandering, which means that the mind by default likes to wander around. Can you bring it under control? And often the word control is not used in a harsh way. It's more like a harness. It's more like a yoke. It's a more gentler approach. So the idea is to control the mind. Now, how do you control the mind? One way to do it is maybe to learn to control the body. So when I'm actually moving my hand or contorting myself, it is actually to develop body awareness. It is to be able to tell myself that this is difficult, but I'm going to compassionately stay in this particular pose and breathe slowly. So you're basically developing the body awareness. You start working on your breathing, and you generally kind of come to a state of mindfulness. So in a good yoga asana session, you actually develop mindfulness. And not just that, it is not about, what you can do in the mat, it is what you can do off the mat. So that's the whole idea. And once you're kind of, confident about how to use your body, then it becomes easier to access your energy. So then pranayama is not just about, breathing techniques to just reduce your stress. It can even become ways to, shift how happy you feel, how motivated you feel, or maybe, what are you, dreaming? I mean, even in your dreams, if you can actually learn to, control your breathing, what changes do you make to your dream state? So it can get pretty esoteric as well. But then I think, like I mentioned, most of my applications or most of the work that I love to do is related to daily living.
So mindfulness, breath work, yoga are all kind of designed to bring us to one pointed focus, to be able to kind of just focus on one thing and to be able to control the mind with a small c, so that we don't have the you talked about baboons earlier on, we don't have the monkey brain, the chimp going backwards and forwards and yatting all the time.
True. So that's actually a beautiful way to think about it, to stop that monkey brain or to get it into control. And once that happens, anyone who has practiced, say, mindfulness, they would say that, it suddenly feels a lot like, they have a lot more space, that they feel relieved. They have a lot more time at hand. They're more effective at work. So many, say, ways that they experience life, again, despite all the challenges that they might be having, life becomes a bit more positive, a bit more enjoyable even.
Can you give us a definition of mindfulness? Because again, over in the West, we have probably kind of diluted the meaning like with yoga. So what's your definition of mindfulness? And can you give an example of how that would work in daily life?
So mindfulness is that pause. I would actually use your words itself because, whenever there is a stimulus and your response, it's that pause. And that pause means that you're present in the now. And it just means that you're taking in everything. You're not just taking the negative situation, you're also taking everything that is positive around you. Maybe I would like to share a little story at this point. I mean, this is a time, maybe quite some time back, 11, 12 years ago, when I was working on it in my own life. And I remember I had had a very busy week at work and I was quite stressed out because there were targets to achieve. And I recall this was in Hong Kong, and we have these trams that still run, and they're called ding ding, right, because of the sound that the bell makes. And I recall getting into this tram and sitting there, and I was really, really stressed out, and thinking of how do I achieve these targets, blah blah blah. And most often my targets are related to well-being and stress release. And at that point, I happened to look to the side, and I see this little girl. She had this biggest, brightest smile in her face, and she was looking at something and she was just smiling. And I looked at her, and just like that, I paused. And I looked at where she was looking. It was a tree. I do not know what tree it was, but it was filled with blossoms. And there was a gentle breeze that day. It was a beautiful blue sky day. There was a gentle breeze, and there were some of these flowers falling down to the ground. And I just looked at it, and it was wow. So suddenly creating that few moments to be able to take in the entirety of my present moment. That I would say is mindfulness. My mind was occupied with maybe targets to achieve, but taking that little break to see that flower, that makes a difference. And when you practice this over and over again, compassionately, if you can practice it compassionately, you would find yourself being able to have those moments more and more. And when that happens, again, the thing is, you realize that the world out there is not as bad, as difficult as we would have in our hyper vigilant minds. So that, I think, is a beautiful way to approach life.
So with mindfulness, is the goal to have lots of moments, or is the goal to kind of expand the moments so they last for longer?
So here I would kind of speak about the difference I experience when I practice mindfulness vis-a-vis meditation. So in mindfulness, in my opinion, it is about accepting the moment in its entirety, like the good and the bad, lots of sensory inputs coming in, maybe the way the breeze is coming in, the light is falling in, the sounds around you, and being able to observe them. Um, how do I put it? Non-judgmental. Okay, so that's going to be mindfulness. Whereas meditation is being able to disconnect. So you can slowly shut down the way the breeze is kind of touching my skin, the way the light is falling. I can go deeper and deeper into this amazing stillness within that nothing seems to exist anymore. So for me, these two are very different, but both of them have similar impact on the brain and greatly, greatly beneficial in improving your health. May not be accessible when you're, in the worst of your times. I mean, when I was going through my anxiety and my depression and my insomnia, if someone told me to practice mindfulness or meditation, it would have been really, really difficult. So those days I started off with the body because it was easy. It is like, okay, let me move my body for 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. Maybe let me do my breathing techniques for 1 minute. And that kind of started moving things around. Let me work with sensory inputs. I was, open to maybe scent of essential oils, textures, surroundings. I start putting myself out there. And then you start actually feeling a bit better so that you can actually start having that discussion with your mind or work with your mind. And you could go either into mindfulness or into meditation. And then eventually you realize both are the same. I mean, the sides of the same coin.
I like that. Both sides of the same coin. It's a beautiful expression. Let's talk about breath work. Can you give us an example of a simple exercise that would help us to start to learn and understand A, what breath work is, and B, kind of like the benefits of doing breath work?
Okay. Let's start with the very basic one because I was 30 before I learned how to breathe properly. Okay. So I always thought I knew how to breathe, and then I realized that my breath was not really helpful. Because when we think about breathing, I mean, you have this entire huge, beautiful lungs. But what happens is that when we were kids, when we are really, really small, when we breathe, the abdomen moves, in the sense when you breathe in, the abdomen expands, and when you breathe out, the abdomen contracts. And this happens for quite some time. And then as we grow, our intercostal muscles, which is on the sides, our ribs, it starts to build. And therefore, this movement in the abdomen gets a bit restricted. And instead, we start just expanding at the chest. Now, what happens is now as we grow older, whenever we are stressed, we don't take deep breaths, we take short breaths. Look in the animal kingdom also. Whenever an animal is stressed, it takes short breaths. And that's what we tend to do. And when we are experiencing stress for a very long time, we take really, really short breaths, which means it is only at the clavicular level. The second is that we all love to look nice. So when we breathe, we try to hold our tummies in. Okay, we want to look nice in our clothes. So we tend to pull that tummy in and then keep ourselves kind of tied down. I mean, at least this is who I was. And when I went through this, whole phase of depression and all that, I realized, okay, I need to start working on my breathing. It took me almost a year and a half. So I would say I'm one of the worst students out there in learning how to breathe. It took me so much of work to just learn to breathe like a child, which is when I breathe in, my abdomen needs to expand. And when I breathe out, the abdomen needs to fall. And that can I breathe slowly and can I breathe rhythmically over and over again. So just learning to practice that was challenging enough. So it took me a year, but then eventually it got really, really good. And now I think every breath I take, it automatically it's slow and deep, which means that I do, it's a shift from the sympathetic nervous system to something more relaxing, the parasympathetic nervous system, where I'm doing slow, deep breathing. So let's go ahead and give that a try. It's very, very basic. So let's start at the very basic. All right.
Go for it. Yeah, sure.
So I want you to keep a hand on your abdomen and a hand on your chest. Take a nice deep breath in and breathe out. And then this time as you breathe in, lift your shoulders up and breathe out, drop it down. Once again, inhale, lift your shoulders up and drop it down. This time we're going to roll our shoulders. So inhale, lift your shoulders up, take it all the way back and then drop. Inhale, lift the shoulders up, take it all the way back and then drop. Stay there and breathe. This way, possibly you have created a bit of opening in your chest. Maybe you have lengthened your neck. And now breathe in and out. Try to feel the hand on the abdomen. When you inhale, let the hand on your abdomen move because your abdomen becomes larger. And when you breathe out, let the abdomen fall. Feel it in your hand. Inhale, abdomen larger. Sense it. Feel it in your palm. Exhale very slowly. 2 more times. Just feeling the palm on your abdomen as you inhale and exhale. When you breathe in, the abdomen becomes larger. And when you breathe out, the abdomen becomes smaller. Inhale, feel the abdomen rise and feel the chest expand. So feel it in both the palms now. As you exhale, release a bit from the chest, then the abdomen starts going in, the chest falls. Inhale, abdomen rises, chest expands. Exhale, a little release from the chest, the abdomen starts going in and then the chest collapses, contracts. Inhale, abdomen rises, chest rises. Exhale, chest falls, abdomen falls. Let's try that with a count. Inhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, abdomen rises, chest rises. And exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Try to count on your own and inhale very slowly, counting 5. And then count 5 as you exhale. Slow your breath, as slow, as gentle as possible. Now take time to relax your jaw. Relax the tongue. Let it sink into the cavity. Relax your cheeks. Continue to breathe slowly in and out. Relax your eyes. Allow it to sink into the socket. Relax your forehead. And just observe that slow breath going in and out. Together, let's take a slow breath in. And breathe out very slowly. Coming out of your breath work, as you inhale, move your hands, gently move your neck, give yourself a bit of a stretch. Exhale, release. Maybe inhale, stretch yourself out. Exhale, and gently open your eyes.
That was amazing. I mean, I was already fairly relaxed before we started, but that was just even better. I could feel kind of all the shoulders and the chest and my neck and everything just really letting go. It's excellent.
Thank you, Paul. I mean, everything that we experience in our mind has a somatic, a body experience. So whatever is the thought, maybe it could be stress, we may not even be aware of it. Or maybe we are going through a bout of depression, maybe it is anxiety. Whatever it is, there is going to be how it gets trapped in our body. So when we work with the breath, when we work with those little things, movements and the we actually learn to release, and it's a beautiful experience. We come back into our body, and that actually is houses our spirit. So once we take care of the body, most of the things that is happening here can be dealt with easily, or rather easier.
Easier. I guess what we really need to do is observe small children under the age of 2, because like you were saying, they breathe in the right way. You see that they don't hold, they don't walk around like this. Their shoulders down, their bodies relax, and they breathe from the abdomen. They're not trying to impress anyone. And yeah, and they have more fun as well. They experiment, they do things, but they are focused on just the one thing that's in front of, whether it's a toy, whether it's food, whether it's a parent. They're not thinking of 25 other different things. If the entire child is like how we should be as adults.
I mean, true, Paul. I mean, if you look at children, I mean, one is the way they breathe. The other is, for instance, after like a slightly challenging, say, physical kind of activity, they relax with a right. That actually makes a difference, and it's global. It's world over, not just again in human beings, even in animals. The way they, and especially when you, observe animals, the way they release stress, they might shake it out, right? Likewise, I mean, things that we could do as children, for instance, something very silly, but right, many adults are not able to do it. And the most heartbreaking thing is, I work with a group called Nirbhaya. This is the Indian NGO by the government, which works with girls who've been abused and children who've been abused. Most of the girls, as young as maybe 10, 8, they're not able to do the. It's because they hold on to so much of stress and so much of anger. Their minds may not even be able to process what has happened to them, but somewhere it has become trapped in their bodies. When I work with women over 40, very often you'll find that they're not able to. Likewise, in yoga, we kind of do this, hugging and bringing the knees to the chest. And if you're lying down, have the knees to the chest to be able to roll all the way one side to the other. It's a very, very silly little thing. It's a silly movement we've all done as kids. But then as people become older, they're not able to do it. It's not because, and they would often say that they are scared. Yes, which is strange because they're not going to fall off. They're not going to fall off a cliff. They're just lying down and then just trying to turn. They're not able to do it because there is a fear response that happens. And just by teaching them to move like children, you actually start getting better at it. And I would actually think the ultimate goal of yoga asanas and yoga classes should be so that we become like children and not very serious people who can do a headstand.
It's so true. Be more child, basically. Nuthan, we've got to finish shortly. What is, if there was only one exercise, one thing that people could do to kind of improve their lives, what would you suggest?
More than an exercise, I think I would ask them to sleep, rest. Okay, so because I would actually recommend longer hours of sleep, and that's an area that I work heavily on. Sleep is kind of my superpower. Okay, so I kind of would suggest instead of more than exercise, if you can get say 7 to 9 hours of sleep, that is going to see a lot of difference in how you wake up and feel energized, how you are more empathetic, how you have the bandwidth, the energy to deal with challenging situations. So maybe more than exercise, even though I love exercise, I would recommend sleep and showers and maybe, little breaks in the day where your exercise is to just lie down and relax.
Okay, I've got a really interesting question. I never get more than about 6 to 6.5 hours sleep every single night. Sometimes I have a longer sleep, but there's a break when I go up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Is there anything that I can do to help myself extend so that I get 7 or 8, 9 hours? I don't think I've ever slept for 9 hours, but say 7 to 8 hours. Is there anything I can do to kind of give myself an extra hour, hour and a half sleep?
So the intervention I have designed for insomnia, thankfully, has been selected at Harvard Medical School for further research.
Oh,
So
wow.
I thank you. So I kind of look at it from, say, the rituals that will help you sleep. So, I kind of have like the three rituals of sleep. The first part is the letting go. So, for instance, maybe the sleep is being hampered because of caffeine. So, looking at things that you need to let go of. Or maybe say 5 to 7 p.m. is the time, where you need to definitely let go of many things. For instance, maybe negative news channels, things like that. Then 7 to 9 p.m. is what I call the ritual of happiness. So, how do you create happiness in your body, in your mind? It could be gentle stretches. Since you're like me or alone, then it could be gentle stretches. That's very, very helpful for the body. It could be breathing techniques, again, gentle techniques, right? And then comes what I call the ritual of trust. Because the only time the entire brain can shut and go to sleep is when it can trust the environment, which means that the temperature should be comfortable. In India, most often my problem with sleep might be dealing with the heat. Okay, maybe in your case it might be it gets too cold. So getting the right temperature out there, being able to tell your body to relax, that it is safe. Is it dark enough so that I can feel that the light, the natural kind of darkness that is there. So many things can be done. In your case, maybe, I mean, just taking a wild guess here, maybe before 5 p.m., I would recommend some sort of vigorous physical activity because whenever the body has, worked out, the parts of the brain related to those parts of the body sleeps deeper. So if you work out just the left hand, the right hand side of the brain would actually sleep a bit deeper. Very strange, right? But making sure that the vigorous activity is earlier, not later. Okay. Then, then towards the evening, maybe doing a bit of mindful stretches. I love essential oils. I work with them, especially from an Ayurvedic perspective, using things which will actually calm you down so that you can set the mood. Changing the way the light interacts. For instance, I think a lot of studies are going on about blue light from the screens and how it is affecting our melatonin. This is something that we need to sleep. So maybe using orange glasses, I mean, which kind of cuts down on your blue light, right? Or ideally, shifting the lights in your room, in your house, so that it kind of, cues a setting of the sun. So 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 9 p.m., it gets darker and darker and cozier, safer and safer, happier and happier, and you sleep like a baby. Insomnia, most often, more than physical things, it is the mind. The word for sleep, nidra in Sanskrit, actually means a state of no desire, where there is nothing actively engaged in your mind. I have to confess here, I have this kind of mind which, if there's a problem, I go over it over and over again. And often in my dream state, I come out with an answer. Okay. So sometimes in my dream, I would actually be working on maybe sleep and I'll be going through research findings over and over again in my dream. And then I wake up to make a note. Not a great thing, not highly recommended, but then that's the quirky brain I have, and I seem to celebrate it the way it is. But I do my best to make sure that I get good sleep. That's non negotiable. Like, good sleep is non negotiable. Exercise, I might be a bit lazy. Food, I might indulge myself in. But I think it's about sleep and, yes, breathing.
Okay, so that's interesting because I do most of those things, not perfectly, but
Mm-hmm.
for example, I try to turn all my screens off by before 9 o'clock, if possible, and then kind of go to bed about 10:30. And I wear a face mask. It's impossible to make my room dark, so I wear a mask across the face. The room is cool, so I'm guessing it must be something that's going on up here, because all of the physical things that I can do, I do. Yeah. So there must be something on up here. So maybe a bit more meditation, or like you say, some gentle stretching before bed.
It could be, and maybe you could. Few other suggestions would be like, maybe taking a bit of. If you take a bath in the evening, okay, a slightly warm bath. But before it, if you could apply a bit of warm oil as well, gently. Okay, that also soothes the body down. Like a lot of oxytocin gets released. Again, things that are saying that it is safer out there. It's like somehow when I, as strange as it sounds, when people are there around me, I sleep faster, better. Again, it's a psychological thing. But when we are alone, we tend to not sleep so well and so deep, because again, it's our survival instinct saying, okay, we need to be vigilant. All right. Same way when I stay in, let's say, hotels, when I'm kind of traveling for work, when I stay in hotels, again, my sleep is not so good. So I often try to create a very safe, comfortable, soothing atmosphere. And in my case, I take my oils along with me and I blend them based on what is necessary. And then that kind of puts me into the right mood. And I also have this strange habit where I kind of watch something funny in the evening. So I make it a point to end the day with something funny and something that's very, life affirming, rather than things about say stress and say sleep and how people are not stressing too much or not sleeping enough. So ideally, finish off the day with something that's life affirming.
Listen, Nuthan, I could talk for a lot longer, but we have to finish now. Where can people reach you?
So I'm the founder of Me Met Me, and so I'm available on my website. That's memetme.com. I'm also available on LinkedIn as Nuthan Manohar, Nuthan Manohar. It's easier to remember Me Met Me. And yes, people often reach out on LinkedIn or Instagram or on Facebook, and I do respond. So always happy to see how I can help somebody else, because when I went through a difficult phase, as much as information was out there and therapists were out there, the thing that I missed was empathy. So if you're looking for empathy during dark times and maybe techniques that might work, I would be very happy to help you.
Listen, Nuthan, thank you so much for your time. I'll put all of your details in the show notes. And listen, folks, thanks for watching, and see you the next episode. Bye now.